Hello and welcome to John Egan and His History, a series of short videos to commemorate John Egan as a lumber baron in the Ottawa Valley and the 175th anniversary of his election as the first mayor of Aylmer in 1847. My name is Isabelle Demeul, president of the Aylmer Heritage Association. The production of those short videos has been made possible by the Programme de soutien aux initiatives de commémoration from the Ministère de la Culture et des Communications du Québec. In this video, our guest is Mr. Michael McBane, author of John Egan, Pine and Politics in the Ottawa Valley. Today, he will talk to us about the important role that John Egan played in the Ottawa Valley. Happy viewing.
John Egan was an early Irish Canadian. He came to Canada about 1811, and he heard about the lumber trade in the Upper Ottawa in Quebec City when he got off the boat from Ireland. And so he came up to Clarendon at first and worked for a lumber company at Clarendon. But he was a very ambitious person, and he soon opened a store in Aylmer about 1830. And got more and more involved in the lumber trade and became eventually, in the space of about 10 years, the largest lumber company in the whole l'Outaouais. And not long after he got very active as a business person, he entered politics as well. So he's not only the founder of several communities, the first mayor of Aylmer, he's also a member of parliament for the county of Pontiac and was a very important political leader in the region. John Egan, as I mentioned, was born in 1811 in Ireland. He died young in his 40s in 1857. So he lived really the first half of the 19th century. Aylmer is a very unique place because it has so much built heritage that still stands, unlike a lot of other places. Aylmer is very rich in built heritage, stone buildings. Egan's house is still standing, still in good shape. It's a beautiful house. And one day it'd be nice if it was a museum and accessible, but it's a beautiful residence, one of the earliest houses built in Aylmer. And there's many other buildings in Aylmer associated with the life of John Egan. The church that he was active in founding, Christ Church, was just across the street from his old house. So Christ Church is very much associated with Egan and Egan's family. The old town hall in Aylmer was where Egan had large public events, some political events were there, and his regular meetings were in the old British Hotel. So you go into the British Hotel and you're communing with John Egan and his contemporaries who are having political meetings or meetings of the town council. So there's a lot of locations, a lot of buildings, actually including the Sims Museum, which was a hotel and associated with the wharf where Egan would regularly catch the steamboat up to Pontiac. So he would have been in this building as well. Egan has not been given a lot of recognition in the history books. He's remembered very briefly as a lumber baron. Some people consider that he was a failure because his company ran into difficulties. They don't consider him important because he was from Pontiac, which is not considered an important urban or political center. But for me, John Egan is important because he was an early pre-Confederation political leader. He helped lay the groundwork, the building blocks for the creation of our political country, for the union of the country. And he helped knit different cultures and different languages together to form a civil society founded on equality and liberty and as opposed to a sectarian society where there was lots of divisions and exclusions. So he was, to me, a very important political pioneer that helped lay the groundwork for the foundation of Canada. I think he's an important figure for two main reasons, which reflect the two aspects of his life. He was important because he helped open up l'Outaouais. He opened up the Ottawa Valley through lumbering, because lumbering brought employment, and as soon as they lumbered with trails into the bush, a lot of his workers then bought the land they cleared and became farmers. So there was a symbiotic relationship between lumbering and farming and settlement. And with that, of course, he was key in developing the infrastructure. Infrastructure first on the river with steamboats and dams and canals, and infrastructure on building roads, and other important infrastructure in terms of housing, schools, hospitals. So Egan was a really important founder of the local settlements, the local economy. And of course, as a political figure, he helped get government support for the growth of this part of Canada. And then the other aspect of his life, where he's made a huge contribution, as I mentioned, was his political leadership, so his life in political office. I think Egan left a really clear political legacy, especially for Pontiac, County Pontiac, because he represented them from 1847 till his death in 1857. And he pulled together really divided communities. The Irish settlers were divided between the orange and the green. The orange were Protestant Orangemen, the green were Irish Catholic. And he pulled them together, and he pulled the French Canadian together. So these three communities that had a tendency to be divided because of differences, they all liked John Egan, they all voted for him, they all supported him. So he helped create cohesion and a political movement beyond sectarian, beyond language, beyond religion. And so that's a legacy that continued, because after he died, just right after they called a by-election to replace him, and the Orange and the Catholics started fighting in that campaign. It was really wild, lots of violence. And so Bryson, who was an Orangeman, he won, and he ran against the Catholic candidate. But as soon as he won, Parliament was dissolved for a general election. So Bryson never took his seat, and he was replaced in the general election by a moderate in the tradition of Egan. So Egan's legacy continued, and we never returned to that kind of divisive politics in the Outaouais and particularly in Pontiac. So that's a living legacy. Yes, I think that Egan has relevance and is a model even in 2022, because he helped build political institutions that we take for granted. A lot of countries don't have solid democracies. Democracies take work. Democracies can weaken and dissolve. So we have to remember the values and the hard work that goes into creating political tolerance and inclusive politics and a functioning democracy. It's interesting, when your association organized a public lecture on Egan, there was a member of the audience, a newly arrived Canadian from Africa, who didn't know that Egan came from an Ireland that was fighting basically almost a civil war. And he was very touched by the fact that Egan came to Canada and said, we left that fighting, we don't want fighting here. We want everyone included. The politics of inclusion, everyone is equal. And leave your old battles outside the country. If you come here, you come in peace and to work with each other with respect. So that's still a lesson, because there's still people coming to Canada. They need to learn our political culture and leave the hostilities of the home countries out of our politics. So it's still a very relevant lesson of how to build civil society.